Like, you don't have control over policy changes, price increases.
Whether it's insurance, whether it's real estate, mortgages, financial advisors, we're taught how to fill our own buckets.
Not only are you pouring into your everyday referral partners, but you're also pouring into those clients.
You don't have to be the busiest guy in the world to be awesome at referring.
It may not be the cheapest, it's always the best. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 3 of the Brady Haye Mortgage Team podcast, where we're building quality relationships with quality people and growing together. Pleased to be joined today with my good friend Rich Bales here. Rich, go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me, Brady. Excited to be a part of the podcast. I'm Rich Bales with Phillips Stafford Insurance Group here in Des Moines, and excited to get going.
I love it. No, I am grateful to have you on, I'll be honest, and obviously maybe some of the viewers may not know who you are yet, but I think you have a ton of value that you can add and pour into the podcast, pour into my viewers, pour into my listeners, just because, frankly, I'll be honest, I've learned a lot from you already, and so I'm excited to kind of share what I've learned and just share your story, how you got to where you are. And really, that's just as a reminder to the listeners, that's the heart behind the podcast. I want my guests to be able to have a platform to share why they do, what they do, why people should work with them, and what makes them different. So just to kind of start things off, give kind of the viewers the background on who you are. Obviously, yes, you're an insurance agent now, but I view you as much more than just an insurance agent. Tell them a little bit about how you got to where you're at, and give them a little bit of your elevator speech here.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm an Iowa kid through and through. Grew up in Pella, lived in Winterset for a little time in Des Moines. Went to Iowa State for 4 years. Got my degree in kinesiology with a psychology minor. So
sounds like insurance to me.
Perfect fit for insurance. Plans out of college were to pursue medical school. Life jumped around a bunch of ways, and I ended up in medical device sales. So a job I didn't even know existed, but for where I was at in life was a good fit. It was something cool where I could stay around medicine, surgery, stuff like that. Provided an opportunity financially, as well as just developing life skills and helped me grow up a ton. So in my time there, I started out on a really small team and got some sales experience as a 21-year-old selling to orthopedic surgeons, where you can imagine had some challenges. A lot of cold calling, a lot of just really uncomfortable stuff. But, at the same time, I think I had kind of a passion for the education piece of it.
Yep.
And that was something that really benefited me within that career. So
love it.
Was fortunate enough to have some early success, eventually grew into a management role, worked on some hiring, some firing, stuff like that. Built out a team, got a chance to help develop some of my team, not only professionally, but also on the personal side of things, which is something that really fulfilled me. So as that continued to go on, along the way, got married. Along the way, started investing in real estate, stuff like that. Eventually had a kid. And that was just kind of like the eye-opening piece for me, where I decided, like, hey, there's a lot of life ahead of me. And I've got a lot of skills that translate well into not just medical device sales, but what I think could be a lot of other industries. So one weekend, my wife and I think we had driven back to Iowa like 3 or 4 weekends in a row. We were living in Omaha at this point in time. And we're just driving home back to Omaha, and we're like, what are we doing?
Right.
Should we move back to where our family is? And I'd become frustrated with my job a little bit. She was feeling the same thing. And we just said, hey, let's take a risk, make a jump, and here we go. So at that point, I started looking at, what else can I do? I'd never even considered it. I'd been so all in on this one thing. And after kind of dabbling in real estate, I saw the benefits of, hey, being your own business, that type of thing, that can have some huge tax benefits, time benefits, just control. So I started looking into, being a real estate agent. I was like, hey, if I'm going to be investing in real estate, being an agent might make sense.
Sure.
Ultimately, I'd had quotas my entire life, stuff like that, and just decided, hey, I'm so tired of getting to the end of the year and all at once I start back over again, back at zero.
I feel that.
Just the weight of that was a lot, right? So talked myself out of that. My father-in-law is a financial advisor. So he was, all in on me being a financial advisor, but for whatever reason, I just decided, at this point in my life, I don't think that was a great fit. So my real estate agent here in town actually said, hey, you should consider insurance. So plugged me in to interview across a bunch of different companies, both captive, and then ultimately the one I ended up with was independent. And I saw what they were doing. I saw the opportunity for residuals and to make an impact on people. I also saw that the fact that this industry was very antiquated. So I came from a very tech advanced
Sure.
sales company. And so I was looking at insurance and I was like, man, nobody's using like any tech. The
Yeah.
average age of agent now is I think like 62, 63, something like that.
That's
So
about how old you are, right?
yeah, so similar age to me, yeah, mentally.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
But when I saw that, I saw, hey, there's a big opportunity here, and honestly, a big need.
Yeah.
So I said, why not? I'll try my hand at it. I went through the interview process with a bunch of companies, and ultimately ended up landing on Phillips Stafford for a variety of reasons.
Sure.
But yeah, here I
So
am.
at the time of recording, it's September of 2023. How long have you been here?
Just over a year.
Okay.
So moved back to Des Moines, let's see, beginning of May of 2022. Spent about a month, gutted our house, redid all that stuff, and then got to work after that.
Jumped right in.
Full steam ahead.
I love
since.
it.
So
I would say, just from my perspective, one of the things you've put a lot of emphasis on early in the first year is really, again, kind of the same thing that I'm trying to focus on, but it starts with relationships, right? Touch on, kind of your approach so far, 12 months in. What's been your approach on how to grow your network, how to grow your business, and then talk about some of the things, from an insurance standpoint that maybe you see yourself doing a little bit different than, like you said, the average market right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I have the advantage of this not being my first quote unquote sales job.
Okay.
Right. And I think one thing in my previous world that differentiated me is, like I mentioned before, I focused on the education piece of it.
Yeah.
So now that translates to insurance, a huge piece for me is educating my clients.
Beauty.
It's not a cut to the bottom where I think a lot of the insurance market is, hey, we'll save you money, we'll save you money, we'll save you money, and that's all we care about. Well, if I save you money and you're not covered in the event of a loss, what good did I do?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So a big part of the way I navigate things is, one, I want to sit down. I always compare it to being a doctor, right?
Yeah.
When you sit down in a doctor's office, before you say anything, he doesn't say, hey, you've got the flu, here's this medicine, take it.
Right.
He asks you questions, he figures out what your symptoms are and tries to solve that problem. So I try to take that approach with my clients too and figure out, what do you actually need here?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, as a broker with all the companies we have, if I wanted to be the cheapest every time,
you could execute
almost
on that.
Always I could.
Yeah.
But that doesn't do anybody any good, so it's not my focus. So that's kind of one way I try to differentiate. Everybody's getting customized videos, detailing throughout their policies, letting them ask questions, stuff like that.
Yep.
And that's one thing that I bring to the table for, whether it be loan officers, whether it be real estate agents, whether it be financial advisors. I'm letting them know on the front end that, like, hey, if you're just looking for somebody to get them the cheapest thing possible, I'm probably not your guy.
Right.
So kind of setting that expectation for everybody has been a big thing on the front end for me. And then one other thing that I kind of did differently when I got into the industry is, I think, when you think insurance guy, I think there's this kind of like this greasy, like, hey, it's going to be your buddy from high school who you haven't talked to in 20 years calling you saying, hey, can I quote your life insurance, your home and auto insurance, whatever. I never wanted to be that guy. I've had that guy. Nobody enjoys it. It's a high pressure scenario. So I actually avoided friends and family to start this business. Organically, it's happened just because people trust you and they see what you're doing. And,
of course,
want to be a part of it. But for me, I went out and said, hey, if I can just be a connector within my community, how much more valuable am I than if I'm the guy who just calls you and says, hey, I want to quote your stuff and save you money, right? So I set out a goal for my first year. I said, hey, I want to have one face-to-face meeting every day for every business day of the year.
Yep.
Tracked that, went through it. And then, within that, I just decided, like, hey, I'm going to pour into everybody around me however I can.
Yep.
As maybe that's limited the first 2 months, 3 months, whatever. But if I know, hey, the volume's there and I'm sitting down with all these people across all these industries in Des Moines,
right?
All of a sudden, now we're a year in and I've met with 300 people.
Yeah.
Right. And I've figured out where's their specialty, what are they doing?
Yep.
Who should you know? And now all of a sudden it's like, me making a relationship introduction for you is probably much more valuable than me going, hey, I can save your clients $100 a year on home insurance.
And I think the thing that stands out to me there is you're not product focused, right? And you're executing at a high level on something that you have control over, rather than, and that's something we'll talk on, a little bit later in the podcast here, but I want to touch on just the concept of insurance. Like, you don't have control over policy changes, price increases, etc. What you can control is the value you provide from an education standpoint and from the relationship side. And I think that that's so great that you've taken that approach. I'll be honest, that's the way I want to approach my business too. By all means, like I want to make sure that I'm executing and getting my clients good mortgage products. But at the end of the day, I want to kind of be that quarterback where you can come to me and you can ask me questions about your loan. You can ask me questions about your escrow. If you have, need in the financial advising space, I've got connectors there. I've got insurance agents. I can kind of plug and play those relationships. And I think you've done a really great job of kind of being that person for your referral partners as well. And for me anyways, it's been kind of a no-brainer to refer business to you because I know you're taking the opportunity to pour into me as well. And it's not as simple as just sending over a lead. It's just adding value from that day-to-day basis. So great job on that.
I think that was one of the first things I identified, like when I got into the industry, right? Is I got really insecure about the fact that it's like, hey, I go meet with these people and they start sending me referrals. Like, yeah. I'll never send the amount of referrals back, right? Yeah. It's the same for you when you look at like a real estate agent, right? Like you'll never be able to feed them the same volume of leads that they feed you.
Right.
So when I looked at that, I said, I had to just come to terms with it, right? Like you have to feel good about what you're doing. And so I had to come to terms with that and decide like, okay, either I can mope around about this and feel weird about it, or I can come up with a way to provide value.
Yeah.
And so for me, pouring into the clients, pouring back into you guys and saying, hey, who do you need to know in the community? If you don't have a lawyer, I've got a lawyer, I've got a financial advisor, I've got all these things. And now making those introductions, making those handoffs, giving you guys tips from like, hey, here's what I learned in my previous business that worked really well, whether it's, coming with events or content or ideas or whatever. Like, that's how I give back, and I know I can create value. So that really helped me get over the hump and kind of change my way of thinking when I got into this.
Yeah. All while still executing at a very high level from an insurance standpoint. Yeah. And that's the cool part is like you obviously still need to be an expert at your craft, right? Because at the end of the day, you are still an insurance agent. Yes. And when you're presented with that opportunity to write a policy for a client, you want to make sure that you're still really informed, really educated on how to execute that at a high level. And so the key with that is that you're knocking that out of the park. Right. But then you're going above and beyond and adding way more value, both for your referral partner standpoint and your clients. Right. I think one of my favorite things, and you touched on it a little bit earlier, but one of my favorite things you do, and we actually do this a lot in our industry as well, but the BombBomb videos pouring in and diving into that policy from an education standpoint and the insurance is so huge. As a consumer of insurance and somebody who owns a property, owns a car, etc., I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of knowledge about what actually a policy should look like, right? And not that you necessarily want to, right? Like, to be honest, like you kind of just want to trust that it's all set up properly.
Yep.
But I think the point that I want to drive home to a lot of people is, to be honest with you, a lot of people may not be insured correctly. And so that's why my perspective is from an insurance standpoint, there's two reasons why you should work with a local insurance agent. Number one is because they're going to look out for your best interest and make sure that policy is structured correctly. Number two is if anything ever goes wrong, they can call you, right? And I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I know that you've provided that value for me, that if you ever need to file a claim or have any issues from an insurance standpoint, you're available and you're able to help execute that claim. Whereas if you're just working with an online company or a bigger insurance company who maybe you don't have a one-on-one contact with, you're going to have to file that claim either online or over the phone. And you're going to have to, sit on hold for who knows how long for that matter. And so I think that's been such a great value add that you're giving is that availability and that personal relationship thing. And that's where I'm all in on that because, again, you want to have those kind of people in your corner.
Yeah. So, just a few things to kind of riff off of that. So at the end of every BombBomb video I give out to somebody, I lay out kind of the 3 additional services that we offer that I don't think are standard for the industry. And there were things that were just kind of pain points that I identified in the beginning. So I see all the time when I look at people's claims history and stuff like that they may have claims that didn't even make sense for them to file, right? So that's one thing that I tell everybody is you call us first when it comes to a claim. And whether that means we're going to coach you through to file it or not, maybe we'll talk you out of it because there are plenty of times where it just makes sense to pay it and it won't impact your rate as much down the line.
Yep.
But yeah, like you said, the other thing is you're not sitting on the phone with a 1-800 number and somebody you've never spoken to. It's somebody you trust.
Yeah.
And we can help either file it for you or coach you through it.
Sure.
The other piece that I think is kind of cool that we found the software for is we monitor people's rates.
Okay.
So most people, you've got your homeowner's insurance and you've set it and forget it, and all of a sudden it's 10 years later and you happen to look in your escrow account and you're like, oh my God, it's
Yeah.
tripled, right? So for us, we have software in place that we monitor it every year. If it goes up 15%, we're getting notified a couple months before it renews. And instead of you going like, oh my gosh, it's changed, you're getting a call from me saying, hey, we just looked across the other 15 companies. It's going to make sense to move you here. I'll send you a DocuSign. Sound good?
Yep.
Okay. So like that's a value add where, again, it was just going, how do I not just be the status quo?
Love that.
How do I find ways to provide value to you guys and make your life easier?
Long beyond closing day.
Far beyond that. So I think that's a big portion of it too. And, you talked about like the education piece of it.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's as much knowing like what you do have for insurance, but almost like identifying what you don't have.
Right.
And that's a huge piece of, being an insurance consultant. I'll use the word consultant because I feel like that's what I am more than just their agent.
Yeah, you really have to ask those questions, figure out what they all own and occupy and everything, and make sure that you're properly covering anything of value, right? So
I have no problem being that pesky guy on the front end where I ask probably more questions than everybody else does.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if your house burns down, I don't want you having an even worse day because you call me and you're like, oh, we never talked about this.
Yep.
I also had a $40,000 wedding ring sitting in the basement, right? And now there's no proof of it. Now there's any of that, right? So I try to overdo it on the questions just on the front end to make sure that we don't miss anything.
And to be truthful, we all hope that we never have to run into that, right? Like we obviously by all means don't want anything like that to ever happen, but it's the what ifs, right? And we have to make sure you're covered in that space. So that's a pot of gold right there. While we're kind of on that topic of homeowners insurance, because I do know that you do more than just homeowners, I want to take a quick opportunity to educate some people that may be listening just around that homeowners insurance and really how it relates to the mortgage side, if you don't mind. I actually had a client reach out yesterday in regards to what's called an escrow shortage, and I want to give a quick education piece into that, how that's derived, and really what that means, because I feel like from a mortgage standpoint, that's probably not talked about enough, and it's actually probably more common than you think. So, quick touch on. First and foremost, I'll give some education into an escrow account. Escrow account, as simple as I can put it, it's like a savings account that your mortgage company manages for you, okay? It's going to pay the property taxes, homeowners insurance, and then if you have PMI or private mortgage insurance, it'll pay that as well. Now, what an escrow shortage is that typically once a year, if not more often, your mortgage servicer is going to be reviewing the balance in that escrow account and make sure there's enough money in that account to pay the bills that are due out of it. Most commonly taxes and insurance, right? Now, why does that shortage happen is the question that I get frequently. The main reason why it happens is because when we set up the mortgage and the time that the person buys a house, that payment and the amount that we're collecting to put into that escrow account is based on the insurance premium and the property taxes at the time that we closed. As a lot of people are probably aware, and if you're not, you should be aware, homeowners insurance and property taxes, those prices can change. Whether you filed a claim and your insurance went up, whether, property taxes every typically 2 years, they're reassessed. Most commonly they go up. They may go down, but most commonly they're going up. Anytime those changes happen, and let's say it costs more to execute on those bills, that escrow account can fall behind on the balance in order to properly execute it. So what happens is the mortgage company does an analysis of that account and says, hey, we need some more money here. So we're going to send you basically a letter in the mail and say we either need to collect more per month or you can pay a one-time cost to bring it up to speed. So I just don't want my clients to be panicked by that. It's kind of a unfortunate reality, I guess you could call it. And I just think it's important to do a quick education point on that, a little bit of a sidebar here on the podcast, but it was just on my heart. I wanted to make sure people are educated on that, know and understand what that means. So if like what Rich talked about, if the insurance policy price ever changes, you make an update to your policy, we're trying to avoid that shortage, right? And so that's where he's going to come into play, and he's going to be able to shop those policies for you if there is ever an increase. If you ever have to file a claim, he's going to have your best interest in mind there. So sorry about that little bit of a tangent there, but I felt like that was important to cover.
No, that's great stuff. And I think, to be honest, we're in kind of a tough market where everybody is seeing rates move up. Obviously, property taxes, especially across kind of the area where we're at, have flown up. So we're seeing it more and more. But again, that's where I say lean on us. Let us do reviews. If you haven't ever had somebody reach out, we see it all the time where it's the person who's, hey, my uncle's brother's friend writes the insurance for our family. We've always trusted him. I've
Yeah.
never met him, but we've been there for 30 years. And then all of a sudden we look and it's like, well, hey, you just saved a couple grand a year,
Yeah.
right? And that makes a huge difference. So I 1,000% appreciate loyalty, and I hope that all of my clients throughout this year are that person 30 years from now. But at the same time, I think we have the benefit of knowing, like, hey, we've got 15 companies to review, and ultimately, like, we're going to find the best thing in the market right now.
Right.
So,
but to that point, it may not be the cheapest. It's always the best, right? And I think that equates both from a mortgage standpoint and an insurance standpoint, that it may not make the most sense to go with the lowest option. You want to make sure you have the proper coverages, make sure that you're getting the proper service you deserve, et cetera. But you're going to be able to advise accordingly on that, make sure they're covered, and everybody's situation is different. So that's why that's where that kind of interview process that you talked about kind of comes into play. We identify their goals, identify their current situation, and kind of assign accordingly.
Right.
So
it's kind of corny, but I always tell everybody cheap insurance is expensive.
Yeah.
Almost always. So, you may save $200 a year.
Yep.
But if all of a sudden you're not covered when your house burns down and it's built back to 3/4 of the size, that just cost you $100 grand. So how many years of $200 savings is it going to take to make up for that, right?
Yeah.
So definitely cheap is not always the option.
Yeah.
Obviously saving you money is a goal, but not to sacrifice coverage. So
Yep, I love that. That's one of the most important things that I think I could ever stress from an insurance standpoint is making sure you're having proper conversations with a professional and that you're taken care of in that space. So that's great. Just kind of one of the more unique things that I would say that I've seen from you is, again, kind of touching back on that you're more than just an insurance agent. One of the number one things you've taught me is kind of the art of referring. Let's chat a little bit about how you've navigated that, how you learned that piece. If you want to kind of take the floor on that, just kind of share what you've taught me, I guess, and kind of,
Yeah, 100%. So try to follow me here because I'll probably be all over the place because this is definitely something I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
I think, I've taught some classes on it. I've done some things that I think it's something that gets lost in the mix, right? I think all of us in all of our careers, whether it's insurance, whether it's real estate, mortgages, financial advisors, we're taught how to fill our own buckets, right? Like everything salesy out there that they teach you is just, how do I get more clients in my own door?
Yep.
And that's a very short-term way to think in my eyes, right? Like if I go knock on doors and all of a sudden people are doing insurance policies with me, that's a very like short-term, not lasting way to fill my bucket.
Yep.
Whereas if I can go build these organic relationships with people and now we trust each other and we're all going to be in front of a lot of people, that's going to generate things. So it's kind of that give to get type thing. So I viewed it as, if I can find a way to fill the buckets of everybody involved with me, whether that be, via giving them referrals, via introducing them to people, giving them knowledge, whatever it is, that is how I see myself long-term gaining referrals. And I think ultimately for all of us, that's probably the most efficient way to do it.
Yeah.
And without a ton of effort.
Right.
Giving to others and filling other people's cups, it makes you feel good, first of
all. It does.
But second of all, I think people recognize it, and it's something that's really underutilized across all of our markets. So as I went through kind of that first year of saying, hey, I want to sit down with people, introduce myself, stuff like that, the big question that I asked myself, but I love asking people now is how are you differentiated, right?
Yeah.
Like what makes you different? And it's funny because people are so challenged by that question because it puts you in an uncomfortable spot, right? So, I'll use like realtor for an example. It's an easy one. I always ask people like, okay, if there's 2,700 of you in Des Moines, why you? What's different? And a lot of times people treat it like it's a rhetorical question when I'm sitting there, but I'll go, no.
You'll sit there, wait.
I'll go, no, actually, like what's your thing?
Why should someone work with you?
And I mean, honestly, probably 50% of people don't have that answer ready to go, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? But like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what you're doing different and now run with that, right?
And if we're not doing anything different, let's have a conversation about what can we do differently.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's been big for me to open my eyes because, it's easy from a day-to-day standpoint to just kind of sit back and execute, and just kind of take care of the little things. But if you really do want to grow and you want to earn those referrals, you do have to, you have to put in that extra work and you have to do something that no one else is doing.
Yeah,
so
100%. And that, it's, for me, another question I love to ask people is always, hey, I walked into this not dumb. Everybody knows an insurance agent, right?
Yeah.
There's a million of them. So I would always ask them, like, what was important to you from that person? Why that person? What were they doing well? What would you prefer out of it, right? And consistently the answer was quick quote, cheap rate.
Yep.
So, okay, well, first of all, being the quickest probably doesn't guarantee it's the best thing for your client.
Right.
And cheap rate, as we talked about, probably isn't. So I looked at that and said, okay, I always kind of like laugh at that answer because I thought, man, there's got to be more.
There's got to be
right?
something
like,
different.
I know personally, like in my heart, I'm like, there's more value than a quick quote and a cheap rate that I can provide. So I had to do some soul searching. And I think it's important for all of our industries to do that because at the end of the day, like we're all more valuable than that. You just have to figure out what that looks like within it. So, so again, off on a tangent there, but when it comes to those ideas, I said, okay, now I got to start building out a way to start filling other people's cups.
Yep.
And so I identified within myself, like, hey, what do I need to do to start filling cups? And it was more than just quick quotes and cheap rates. It was, whether it was conversation training, like stuff that I had learned in my previous job, where there was introductions, where there was all those things. And in turn, I've gained so much credibility from these people I have in my life now that support my business and my clients and stuff like that, that I'm slowly achieving this goal of becoming, as you mentioned before, the quarterback of their lives, right? So my entire purpose in this is if I can be the guy that gets a call from a stranger off the street who says, hey, my insurance rates went up, or I'm getting a new car or whatever, I need help.
Yep.
And I can navigate that. Now they're a client of mine. A month later, I go, hey, you've accomplished some things financially. Next step, do you have a financial advisor? If the answer is no, I've already vetted a bunch of them. I'll send you to one of mine. They're great. It's a no pressure scenario. Awesome.
Yep.
Now they're teed up there. Hey, if you ever think about buying a house, I work with some great mortgage lenders.
Yep.
Have a conversation just to get teed up, right? Okay, next step. You're pre-approved. Do you need a reference for a realtor? Boom. And now I'm getting calls from people like, hey, I'm getting mail on, adjusting my credit and this and that. Like, can you help me?
Yeah.
And the answer is no.
Right.
But I know somebody who can, right? And the fact
Love
that you called me, like that's the goal, right? So I think for all of us, if you can find a way to become that centerpiece, you become substantially more value than just the mortgage person.
And how cool is that you, with that, not only are you pouring into your everyday referral partners, but you're also pouring into those clients, right? 100%. So it's a value add from both sides, which I love because you can pour into your referral partners. You can, be the one that's connecting with your clients, right? But then you also, from a client perspective, the people that are getting insurance from you have this wealth of resources and basically what I like to call this walking, basically, yellow pages of somebody that if you ever need anything at all from any industry, because I know people outside of just mortgage, real estate, you've got connections everywhere. And that's really where I want to be too, is to continue to connect with people. And that's kind of the heart behind this podcast. I want to take this to many, many different industries and just be the most connected person I possibly can so that I can, use that to opportunity to continue to pour into people, add that value, and grow together.
For sure. And I think when you can do that, that separates you from just being viewed as like a certain bill or a certain percentage on a mortgage, right? So now they're looking at me not going like, wow, my auto insurance just went up $10 a month. I'm going to call 10 other agents. They're going, all right, Rich teed me up with my loan officer, my real estate agent, my financial advisor. Yep. He helped me with my debt by connecting me with a banker, whatever. I really don't care about $10 a month because I want that guy in my corner.
Right.
And I think all of us in all of our industries should be competing to be that person, right? Because I see it so often where, not to like speak down on people, but it's so often that referring has become a passive thing.
Right.
So like one of the most common things I'll see is people will say like, well, I've got a list of 3 that I send out on an email of insurance, realtors, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And in my head, when I see that as a consumer, if I got that, I go, oh, whatever, like they don't care. There's a bunch of people listed on
it. Right. There's no actual like connection or value that they see in that person. It's simply just a list.
And it happens so often where, you'll get a message from somebody, hey, you should be hearing from so-and-so. And then you never hear from them. Right. And I struggled with that in the beginning where I'd tell people like, hey, I'd call a roofer, like I've got 3 people that'll be calling you. Don't worry about it.
Right.
But guess what? Like their dad knew somebody when they called him after me and then they went with them and never even speak to my people, even though I trust that my people are the best in the industry.
Right.
So when I looked at that, I thought, okay, this is becoming too passive. I've got to start becoming intentional with the way I refer.
Yes.
And so the thing I speak to is closing the loop. So I'll almost always be on the phone with them, talk about what's going on, what do they need, let them know like, hey, I've got a great referral for you. I've executed 20, 25 deals with them or 25 instances with them, and they all go awesome.
Yep.
Right. So whether it's a roofer or a mortgage lender, whatever it is, That's the conversation. And then as soon as we get off the phone, I let them know, hey, I'm either going to put you on a group email or a group text. Are you good with that?
Yep.
And 99% of the time, the answer is yes, of course, please do it. And now all of a sudden the ball is in your court to handle it. If it doesn't work out, totally fine. Like, I don't expect everybody to be a match, but at least gives my people a chance to do that.
Yep.
So, and then within that, the illustration I always give is, so I just presented to a group of realtors like a month ago. I talked about, you don't have to be the busiest guy in the world to be awesome at referring, right? And to be viewed as valuable. So I always give the example of, okay, if you've got a realtor who does 100 deals a year and a realtor who does 50 deals a year, the guy who does 100, all he does is send out an email with 3 names. And I asked the room, I said, what percentage of those do you think go with somebody from your list? And they came up with like between 10 and 15%. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've sent 10 to 15 referrals. You were never a part of really the referral process. You just said, hey, run with it. They probably don't even bring you up when they call them. Whereas the guy who does 50 deals, every single one, he's spending a 5-minute phone call saying like, hey, mortgage is a really important piece of this. If you're not absolutely tied to this person, I insist you at least talk to my person because, I do 50 deals a year. He executes 40 of them. Trust me, it'll go well if you work with Brady. Yeah. Right. Now, then I asked, what percentage of those people do you think are going to call your guy? And they were like 90,
95,
almost all of them.
Yep.
Okay. So now let's assume you get even close to that many of them. Mm-hmm. You've just gotten 2 to 3 times as many referrals out of this person than the guy who did 100 deals.
Exactly.
Right? So, and then in turn, now that realtor is the person that connected all these people with a home run mortgage lender or a home run real estate agent or, the guy who remodels the house when they move in. Yeah. So for all of us,
and then it makes it a no-brainer to pour back in, and reciprocate.
Exactly.
And if we can't execute on that, it's harder to do, right? So
and that's, again, now that client is tied to you because you weren't just the person that did that transaction and then were gone.
That's so good.
You had all of these roots built into their life because they're going to get credit for having a 5-star insurance guy, a 5-star mortgage guy, a builder, whatever it is.
And I think that goes back to the topic that Louie and I talked about in episode 1 is it's really, we want to be an extension of each other's businesses, right? And if we're all going to be in a referral group or referral source and we're all going to have this circle of referrals back and forth, we really need to make sure that we're partnering with the right people that are all going to execute business and the opportunities the way that we would want our people to execute on. And so that's why it's so important to not only do you just partner with good people and say that you're going to partner with them, but actually execute on it, right? And
100%.
I think that's where, at least from my perspective, I've seen that a lot where I see myself as that go-to person, and I may be on that 3-person list that you talked about, but how often are we actually partnering up to close that loop, as you said, and make sure that our people are connecting with the right ones?
Yep. So, and honestly, having that 3 people is great. If you have more than one, that's awesome. I think just for each one, being really intentional about sending to somebody is great. And if they're not a good fit.
Yeah, and you'll know person to person who the right fit is for it. It's not saying you have to work with only one person in every industry, right? But it's kind of getting to know the people that you're referring and making sure that you know who's going to be the best fit to work with them. And then when you discover that, closing that loop and making sure that they connect with each other.
Right. Well, and that's a piece I talked about earlier a little bit is okay, so when I ask people that differentiation question, right?
Yep.
It's really important for you, if you have referral partners, to know their answer to that question, right? Because at the end of the day, you're selling their personality or their work style or whatever it is. And if you've never even asked them that question, then how are you going to convince someone else to work with them, right?
Yeah.
What is their why? So for you, it's a really easy one, right? I know where your heart's at in it. You just care.
Yep.
That's your thing, and if I didn't know that answer, it'd be really tough for me to say hey, yeah, go work with Brady because
I don't know why.
Because I don't know why. Because he does mortgages, and if
I think he does anyway.
Yeah, as far as I know. But if that's all you have, that's tough. Having the story behind that person and what they're about is so important.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, it protects your backside in all of this, right?
Yeah.
So, if I'm the first guy in on a client and I don't even think about who they're working with on the backside, I don't know who their mortgage person is, their realtor, their financial advisor. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? If they're loyal to another insurance agent, at renewal time, if they're talking to their financial advisor, who's he telling them to go to?
Right.
Right? Whereas if all of a sudden I'm the guy who's controlled all of these pieces of their life, they're not going to be talked out of you because you teed them up to all these people. And all these people are then going to be loyal to you, or at least you would hope so,
Right.
for sending them that referral.
Yep.
So I think for all of us, it protects yourselves, it protects the clients, it protects your referral partners. So you just have to be intentional with it. And I think because of that, your business can grow substantially faster than just focusing inward. So
I love it. No, that's huge. I think that that's a huge value add from an entrepreneur standpoint. Any entrepreneurs listening to this, I would love if you guys would implement that, take that approach. Now, on the flip side, I'd love to chat with you a little bit more about kind of the opposite of that, where from a referral standpoint, from a client standpoint, and what I'm kind of meaning by that, and if that doesn't make sense, what I've struggled with in the past is bridging that gap between just being good friends and like being intentional with my relationships and actually asking for business, right? Because like as a entrepreneur, mortgage lender myself, I want to have as many people in my corner as I want to have good friends, right? And what I've struggled with in the past is bridging that gap and saying, okay, I'm just friends with you because I enjoy you as a person and I want to be friends, right? And I could see from their perspective, it's like, oh, he's just trying to earn my business, which I hope that like no one ever sees me that way.
Yeah.
But I'd love to have you chat on that, like outside of just, us, networking with other business partners and people like that. Talk about how you handle your everyday relationships with just friends and kind of obviously, yes, you got to sprinkle in a little bit like, hey, I'm a business owner. I love your referrals, while also still just making sure that you're intentional about just being a good human being and want to be friends with them too.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, that was something I was very intentional about and actually communicated to a lot of my friends when I got into the industry, because it was, it's kind of that question where someone's like, oh, what do you do? And you go, oh, I'm insurance. And they go, oh, okay.
Oh, great. Here we go. Sales time.
Oh boy. Right. Yep. And so I, to be honest, for that first year, just said like, hey, if they come to me, awesome.
Yep.
If they don't, also awesome. I'm not even going to bring it up to these people.
Yeah.
And I think having that attitude served me so well, because it was like the 6-month trial period of they're like, really?
Right.
Rich just left medical device sales to become an insurance agent.
And he hasn't begged me for my business yet?
Yeah. Like, what's going on here? Right. So then it was, okay, now I'm going out and building these relationships with, successful people. And I'm doing these things. And all of a sudden they're seeing like, wow, Rich is on social media. Wow, he just talked about something I've never heard.
Yeah.
And
he actually knows what he's talking about.
He knows what he's talking about. And I think that's something, though, that the people who are close to me in my life understand.
They get
like,
that.
I'm an obsessor.
Yeah.
Right. Like I will not.
You're gonna go all in.
Let something slip by,
Mm-hmm.
and if I'm gonna be an insurance agent, I'm gonna do everything in my power to be the best one out there.
Right.
And so I think there were a lot of people who watched from afar in the beginning just to see like
how it's gonna handle it.
Is this just like filling up a little time, or is he all in on it?
Yeah.
I think once they saw like left a career I'd been in for 10 years, which I was pretty successful at.
Yeah.
And said like, I am going all in on this, and all of a sudden they saw kind of the snowball start going. And I think the goal is you want to be a person that people are excited to work with. Right. And I talked to you about this not too long ago, but in those meetings throughout my first year, I said I think one of the best things I figured out was just how to like discern if people are like me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a guy who I can sit down for a coffee meeting and sit there for 2 hours if it's the right person, just because I want to be a sponge. I want to absorb what they're doing. I want to do all this stuff. And there are also ones where I'm like 5 minutes in, like, man, if I could just get out of here,
might not be the right
that
fit.
would be awesome, because I know, and that's okay, right? And it's okay to address that. And so I think as I've done that, I've just aligned myself with people that I just know are on that same trajectory, and I'm excited about it. So when I talk about it, I speak passionately about it, because this is the rest of my life, and I'm committed to that.
Right.
And so now I think when my family and my friends see that, and they, when they bring up like, hey, how's life, how's work, and I'm like, it's freaking awesome. Here's what I'm doing. I'm working with, home and auto people. I'm doing businesses. I'm excited. Like, here's what I learned.
Yeah.
Or when insurance comes up in a conversation and I throw a note out where they're like, oh, wow, no one's ever said that to me. Right.
Yeah.
Then they're like, man, then it kind of starts catching on where you're like, man, I think Rich actually knows what he's talking about. Like, maybe we should call him. Right. So it's been a very slow play, but as that's happened, again, it's just spider webs where now my family and friends are like, I should talk to Rich. And I still get challenged by them, probably more than other people.
Of course.
Where they're like wanting to test it. But at the end of the day, that's where I'm confident. Like, hey, people want to be challenged. They want a professional to take a hold of the situation and tell them like, hey, I know your perception of it was this. That's not how it works. This is how it works.
Totally.
And that's a book that I read. It's called The Challenger Sale.
Okay.
I tell a lot of people to read this book. It's a lot of what our young reps in my old career would read. People are looking to be challenged. And sometimes that navigates the line of uncomfortability, but that's okay. And I think as a professional, you have to do that. You owe it to your people to do that because, everybody thinks they're a real estate agent. Everybody thinks they're an insurance agent, but unless you can give them like the why and the how and truly challenge them as a professional, you're probably going to leave some things on the table. And I think because I'm willing to do that to my clients, to my referral partners, stuff like that, it's probably created some tension in some early situations. But at the end of the day, I think, they probably walk out of some of those meetings like, man, Rich is kind of a dick. And then but then they're like, the next 2 weeks, like, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, that checks out. Yeah.
I'm glad Rich said that. Right. So
yep.
It's being able to take that risk. And I think in doing so, people respect you for it.
I love it. No, I think that's huge. I think that the point that I'm sure you do too, but the point I want to drive home there is like, we want to work with as many people as we can. By all means, like we appreciate your referrals more than we can frankly ever put into words, but also don't ever view us as like we're only business people. We are human beings. We still want to be your friend. We want to be here for you outside of insurance, outside of mortgage, etc. Like we are caring human beings, and we're here to help whenever you need anything. But at the same time, like, I never want my brand to be viewed as the guy that's going to pressure you into working with me, pressuring you into sending me referrals. But my hope is you see how much we care. You see the efforts and the execution that we put in on a day-to-day basis, so that it's an absolute no-brainer as soon as you hear somebody mention mortgage or insurance, or frankly, for anybody else listening, whatever industry you're in. My hope is that you can build rapport with people enough to the point where you're proven as the expert, and it's a no-brainer to refer business your way. Yep. And that's where, again, I keep going back to the heart of this podcast, and what I really hope comes out of this is that over the episodes, as this grows, as we get more listeners, we can create this kind of funnel in this spider web of referrals of great, incredible entrepreneurs that are, starting off in the Des Moines market. If it continues to grow, great. I'd love to fly over the United States and make this the biggest podcast ever. Right. But I really just want to be that connector and just add as much value as we can. And that tagline is going to always be building quality relationships with quality people and growing together. And that's so cool. So wrapping things up here, Rich, you've been anticipating this question for a while now, and I think you've got an answer ready. But as the viewers will learn to know, my final question I ask all my interviewees here is favorite chicken wing spot.
Yeah, so for me, this goes back to my Omaha days.
Okay.
We had a little shop. Actually, it's probably a tie because they kind of did them the same. So we had two places in Omaha, and their wings, the way they did them, they were called char buffs. So they throw them on the grill.
Got it.
That's one thing. So get fried, toss them on the grill. And then they dip them in sauce, take them back on the grill, and then dip them in sauce again. So char buffed, double dipped.
Got it.
Was the way to do it. So
what's the name of the place?
So there was one in Council Bluffs that was voted actually best wings in the state of Iowa.
Oh, wow.
The Salty Dog is the name of it. And then there was one in West Omaha, which you put me on the spot now, and I'm losing the name of that one. But I'll have to get back to you on that. But right. Salty Dog is virtually the same wings in Council Bluffs.
Here's what we'll do, guys. Rich is going to look up this place, and he's going to put it in the comments below here for 100%. Us. So I think this is one of my favorite questions of the podcast because it's going to create me an opportunity to just travel across the world and try all these incredible chicken wing spots. But no, I think it's great. I appreciate your insight. Appreciate you joining me. I've been proud to call you, a business partner over the last year that I've gotten to know you. But more importantly, I've gotten to call you a friend, and I thank you for just pouring into me, caring about bettering my business, my personal life, everything. So thank you for joining today. For those of you listening, thank you for sticking with us through this episode and continuing to follow along this journey. Sounds really cheesy, and I feel like every podcast and YouTuber says this, but if you could do me a favor and like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff helps. Sharing the podcast, sharing news about who we are, it really means a lot. So thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you guys next episode.
All right, thanks guys.